My name is Dr. Eris Thorne, and I never thought I would be the one to record a message like this. What happened to me defies every law of physics I have dedicated my life to understanding. It feels unreal, like a complex equation that resolves into an impossible, beautiful answer. I am an astrophysicist. My life has been spent charting the silent, mathematical dance of the cosmos, not seeking a personal encounter with the architect behind it, but I was taken. I crossed a threshold I didn't know existed. I saw the face of Christ, and he showed me a divine blueprint of what is to come. He revealed three world-altering events, great shifts that are set to begin in the spring of 2026. What I am about to share is the most difficult data I have ever had to present, but I was sent back with the undeniable conviction that you were meant to hear it. This isn't a theory, it's a testimony. For years, my son, Leo, and I have looked at the same night sky and seen two different universes. I saw gravitational lensing, stellar nurseries, and the cold, elegant mathematics of redshift. He, an artist with charcoal-stained fingers, saw what he called the soul of the universe. He would show me paintings of swirling nebulae that looked more like living things than clouds of gas, telling me he was trying to capture the feeling, not the facts. I would smile patiently, explaining the spectrometry readings, trying to ground him in reality. I had no idea his reality was closer to the truth than my own. Please listen carefully until the end. And before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to Afterlife Info, because the information I carry is not my own, and it is meant to be shared. The day it happened began with an unnatural silence. I was at the Atacama Observatory in Chile, overseeing a deep field analysis. My world was one of sterile clean rooms and the quiet hum of supercomputers processing petabytes of data from the cosmos. I lived by numbers, by the predictable decay of light signatures and the elegant certainty of gravitational physics. My comfort was in the static, the faint radio hiss left over from the Big Bang, a constant, reliable echo of explainable origin. That morning, however, the static changed. An alert pinged on my console, a gamma ray burst, designated GRB 260,315. My heart gave a familiar academic thrill. These are the most violent events in the universe, the death cries of massive stars, unleashing more energy in seconds than our sun will in its entire lifetime. But as the data flowed in, a cold, sharp dread replaced the excitement. The telemetry was impossible. The burst had a clear point of origin, a direction, but the energy signature was zero. There was no gamma radiation, no X-rays, no detectable neutrinos. It was a silent explosion, a physical paradox. "It's a ghost in the machine, Aris," my colleague, Dr. Lena Petrova, said over my shoulder, her voice tight with confusion. "A sensor echo, it has to be." I agreed, nodding numbly, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were the ghosts, and the universe was trying to show us something real. The true anomaly came an hour later. A call came from the surface crew. They were shouting, telling me to come outside. I walked out of the pressurized dome into the thin, cold desert air, and my breath caught in my throat. Above us, in the crystal-clear daytime sky, a shimmering curtain of light was forming. An aurora, but not a normal one. This one was a perfect, intricate spiral of emerald and violet, and in its center was a dark, unblinking spot, like a great celestial eye looking down on us. It was breathtaking, terrifying, and utterly impossible. We were thousands of miles from the magnetic poles, with no preceding solar flare to explain it. It was a storm with no source, a whisper in the cosmic static. Later that evening, back in my temporary housing, a video call came through from my son, Leo. He was excited, holding up a new canvas to his laptop camera. "Dad, check it out. I had this dream last night, couldn't shake it." On the canvas was a swirling vortex of green and purple. And in the center, a dark, perfectly circular void. My blood ran cold. It was the same celestial eye I had seen over the desert. "It's just a pattern, Leo," I managed to say, my voice strained, "just an abstract." He looked disappointed. "No, it's not," he said quietly. "It felt like it was watching me." I ended the call, my mind racing, trying to calculate the odds, to find a logical explanation for the coincidence. But deep down, a part of me I had long silenced whispered a chilling, simple thought. It's not a coincidence. I left the observatory that night with my mind a chaotic mess of impossible data. Driving the long, dark road back to my lodgings, I felt a strange restlessness. A feeling that the silence of the Atacama Desert was no longer peaceful, but charged with an unspoken anticipation. The sky above was a flawless canopy of stars, a map I knew better than the back of my own hand. Yet something felt wrong. I couldn't explain it through atmospheric science. The barometric pressure was stable, the air still. It was a pressure I felt in my soul, a sense that the immutable laws of the universe were holding their breath. I pulled the car over, the crunch of gravel under the tires the only sound for 100 miles. I stepped out into the biting cold and looked up, seeking comfort in the familiar constellations of the southern hemisphere. That's when I saw it, a single pinpoint of light, right on the edge of the Orion Nebula, a star that wasn't on any of my charts, pulsed once with a brilliant blue-white intensity. Then, impossibly, it detached itself from the cosmic tapestry and began to move. It grew larger, brighter, streaking directly towards me, not like a meteor burning in the atmosphere, but like a hole was being punched through the fabric of space itself. My vision blurred at the edges. A ringing sound filled my ears, starting as a low hum and rising in pitch until it sounded like 1,000 resonating crystals. My hands trembled not from the cold, but from a fundamental vibration that seemed to be shaking the very atoms of my body. I stumbled back against my car, gasping for air that suddenly felt thin and useless. In that moment, as the light filled my entire field of vision, everything slowed. My last coherent thought was not of data or equations. It was the image of my son's painting, the celestial eye, burning in my mind. A wave of profound regret washed over me for having dismissed his intuition, for having chosen the cold comfort of facts over the warmth of his faith. I wanted to tell him he was right. I wanted to tell him I was sorry. But the world was already deconstructing around me. The ground, the car, the distant mountains, they didn't dissolve into mist, they fractured, folding in on themselves in a silent, breathtaking display of geometric patterns and fractals of light. It was a perfect, terrifying, beautiful collapse of spacetime, and just like that, I was no longer standing in the desert. I was falling into the equation. I was crossing over. I always imagined the end of consciousness, if it came, would be a fade to black, a cessation of data, but it wasn't. It was an awakening into a silence so absolute it was a presence in itself. I remember opening my eyes, expecting chaos or nothingness. Instead, I was standing barefoot on a ground that looked like polished obsidian, stretching into a flawless, edgeless horizon. Above me was not a sky, but a dome of pure, living light that pulsed with a soft, steady rhythm, like the breathing of a sleeping god. My first thought wasn't one of fear, but of pure scientific wonder. The known laws of physics are absent here. "Where am I?" I whispered into the profound stillness. A voice answered not through the air, but from within the very fabric of my awareness, gentle and unwavering. "You are safe." I turned, expecting a source, a speaker, but there was no figure. There was only the radiance, which seemed to wrap around me like a warm, gravitational field, holding me securely in this impossible space. The silence was alive. I could perceive my own thoughts as if they were being played back to me with perfect clarity. My memories began to flicker around me, not as hazy recollections, but as vivid, tangible data streams. I saw my son Leo's face on his 5th birthday, illuminated by candles, his laughter a perfect sine wave of joy. I saw the pale green glow of Fortran code on a terminal screen from my graduate school days. I felt the memory of my late wife's favorite piece by Bach, not as a sound, but as a complex, beautiful, emotional equation that resonated through the air. I knelt, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of information, by the raw data of my own life laid bare. My body, or the form I now inhabited, felt completely weightless, and yet I carried the full mass of every choice I had ever made, every word I had ever spoken. But there was no judgment here, no cosmic trial. There was only pure understanding, a context for every action that I had never possessed before. Then I noticed the ground beneath me. It wasn't solid black, it was shimmering with constellations of symbols. They were living equations, the fundamental mathematics of the universe, swirling like galaxies under the glass. I saw the formulae for stellar nucleosynthesis, the elegant dance of orbital mechanics, blueprints of time itself. Trembling, I whispered the ultimate question. Am I dead? The voice within me replied, its tone one of infinite patience. No, Eris, you are between. I wanted to argue, to demand data and proof, but my heart knew. This was the threshold, the silent event horizon between my world and the next. And in that perfect, information-rich silence, I felt a new variable begin to resolve out of the background radiation. A presence approaching, brighter, warmer, and carrying a signal that my soul registered not as energy, but as love. It was him. The silence did not last. The ocean of pure information I was floating in began to move, to flow. The static equations and swirling symbols of light began to coalesce, drawing together into a single, powerful current that twisted the space around me into a tunnel. But this was no ordinary tunnel. It was a corridor woven from the fabric of spacetime itself. It was made of skis. I saw the violent, brilliant birth of a star, its plasma flares licking the edges of the corridor in silent, beautiful explosions. I flew through the heart of a phantom galaxy, its spiral arms made of starlight and memory. I witnessed planets coalescing from cosmic dust and asteroids being shaped into moons, all flowing around me in a majestic, swirling ballet of creation. I whispered aloud, though no one was near, "This is impossible." Yet the voice inside me replied gently, "Nothing here is impossible. You are simply traveling through the memory of creation." I stepped forward and the obsidian ground shifted beneath me, turning from solid glass into a liquid-like surface that perfectly held my weight. The tunnel called me in, and I obeyed, drawn by a curiosity that was more powerful than any fear. With each step I felt lighter, as though I was shedding the immense, invisible weights I had carried all my life. I felt the decades of academic pride, the relentless pressure to publish, the quiet arrogance of believing my instruments could capture the whole truth, all of it peeled away from me like a heavy coat. I thought of my son Leo and his painting of the celestial eye. A pang of regret, sharp and deep, shot through me. I had looked at his art and seen only a naive fantasy, when all along he had been painting a truth my satellites could never see. As that regret surfaced, the light of the tunnel seemed to flow into it, not erasing the memory, but healing the wound, replacing my pride with a profound, humbling awe. As I moved deeper, the cosmic display began to change. The phenomena were no longer random. They began to form intentional patterns, a divine architecture revealing itself. A vast, crimson nebula pulsed with light in the unmistakable shape of a great heart. A distant cluster of galaxies arranged themselves into a form that looked like a hand stretched wide in a gesture of offering. I realized this was not chaos, this was art. This was the universe itself showing me how the heavens were not just formed, but written, composed like a grand symphony. "Why me?" I asked softly, my voice trembling. The answer came clear and resonant as a bell. "Because you have watched the skis, Eris. Now the skis will watch through you." And as those words sank into the very core of my being, a profound peace settled over me. I was not alone, and I knew with absolute certainty that something holy was waiting for me at the end of this tunnel. At the end of the tunnel of creation, I expected a crescendo. A singularity, a final, blinding flash of a new Big Bang, some cosmic event my instruments would scream to witness. But what I found was even stranger. It was a place of perfect, silent light, so pure and absolute that it hummed with a quiet, powerful music. And there, standing in the heart of the glow, was a figure. He wasn't blinding or harsh. He was formed from gentle light, like the sun as seen through a morning fog on a calm sea. My scientific mind tried to analyze it, to categorize the emission spectrum, but there was no radiation, no heat in the conventional sense. This light didn't emit energy, it emitted peace. I knew instantly that this was not a light, it was the light. "Jesus," I whispered, and the name felt less like a word I was speaking and more like a memory I was finally unlocking, a fundamental constant of the universe I had somehow overlooked. He stepped closer, and as he did, I felt a force acting upon me, a gentle but irresistible pull. It was not the gravity of a star bending spacetime. It was the gravity of pure, unconditional love, a force that drew my very soul toward its center. Though I couldn't see his face in the way we see human faces, I knew his eyes held the light of every star I had ever catalogued, and the perfect, elegant darkness of every void between them. His presence was a warmth that went beyond skin, beyond breath. It was a warmth that filled the soul. Eris, he said, and my own name, spoken by that voice, sounded both new and eternal. My knees gave out. The astrophysicist who had lectured to halls of academics knelt like a child, caught in an awe so profound it erased everything he thought he knew. "Why am I here?" I asked, my voice trembling. "You have mapped the heavens," he answered, his voice like a gentle solar wind, speaking directly to my heart. "But now you will see the heart that beats within them." His hand, which was not made of flesh but of pure condensed starlight, lifted toward me. And in the space between us I suddenly saw it all: storms swirling on distant gas giants, cities on Earth glowing like neural networks, oceans pulsing like a single lung, galaxies spinning in a great, silent rhythm. It was all connected, all part of one magnificent living organism. My heart raced, a frantic human rhythm against the perfect cadence of the cosmos. "Lord, I don't understand," I stammered. "You will," he said softly, "but you must remember and you must share." Tears rolled down my face without me realizing. For the first time, I wasn't a scientist observing the universe. I was a soul being shown the face of its creator, and then he began to reveal the visions. The way he appeared wasn't like an arrival. It was like remembering a fundamental constant of the universe you had always known but had forgotten. And his voice wasn't mere sound traveling through a medium. It was like standing in a gentle solar wind that spoke directly to the bones of your being. Every word held an impossible peace, yet also a profound urgency, as though time itself paused to listen. "Eris," he said again, his voice grounding me, "you have trusted numbers, satellites, and the light from long-dead stars, but the events to come are written in a place no human chart can see." He opened his hand, and the very fabric of the space between us warped, its geometry shifting as if a powerful gravitational wave were passing through it. I watched, mesmerized, as 5 circles of light formed in the air around him, each glowing with its own distinct living hue. The first was a brilliant gold, and within it I could see what looked like lines of fire being written across a night sky. The second was a deep, oceanic blue, and I saw shapes rising from swirling, illuminated waters. The third was a stark crimson red, containing the faint, flickering outline of a nation under immense pressure. The fourth was a cool, sovereign emerald, and inside I saw figures standing at a great crossroads. The fifth and final circle was a pure, blinding white, and from its center, a warm, golden light pulsed outward, promising renewal. "These are not storms of Earth," he explained, his voice quieting the frantic calculations in my mind. "They are movements, cosmic alignments that will shape the lives of many." I swallowed hard, the weight of the moment pressing down on me. The scientist in me was gone, replaced by a trembling, humbled soul. "Lord," I asked, "what do you want me to do?" His answer was a simple, powerful command: "Look, see, remember." He reached out and touched my forehead with a finger made of pure light. The warmth seared through me, not painful but overwhelming. It was an instantaneous transfer of information on a scale I could barely comprehend. My mind flooded with the visions, the details, the feelings, all too fast to grasp individually, yet my soul absorbed every photon, every wave of truth. I begged inside my mind, a desperate, silent plea: "Please, don't let me forget this when I return." He answered the thought instantly, his voice a comforting anchor in the storm of revelation. "You won't. It is now written within you." At that moment, I realized this wasn't a private observation. This was data meant for peer review, a message intended for all of humanity. And then he began with the first event. The scene shifted. I was no longer standing in the luminous presence of Christ. Instead, I was looking down upon the earth, suspended in the silent void of space as if I were a satellite myself. My home, a beautiful swirling marble of blue and white, hung peacefully below me. And then a date, a time, burned itself into my consciousness with the force of a physical brand: late October 2025. The month itself pulsed like a marker across the timeline, a period mere weeks from the very day I now record this message for you. As I floated watching, the skis of Earth stretched wide, and suddenly I saw it, a flash. It erupted across the heavens, a silent, brilliant pulse of golden light so powerful that it seemed to momentarily silence the entire world below. My mind raced, desperately trying to categorize the event, to fit it into a known box of cosmic phenomena. It had the luminosity of a near-Earth supernova, but left no stellar remnant. It moved with the speed of a meteor shower, but with an intelligent, geometric precision. It was an event with no discernible physical cause. People all over the globe, in every time zone, looked up at once. The vision granted me a perspective that was both global and intimately personal. In a Chilean observatory, a fellow astronomer ripped his eye from the telescope, his face pale with disbelief. In a Tokyo apartment, a little girl pressed her hands to the window, not in fear, but in wide-eyed wonder. In the Vatican, a cardinal fell to his knees in the middle of St. Peter's Square. No one, from the most devout believer to the most hardened atheist, could deny what they were seeing. "Lord, what is this?" I whispered into the void. His voice replied, a calm current beneath the tide of my awe. "It is a sign, the first of the 5. It will awaken hearts that have long been asleep, but it will also divide them. Some will see it and believe, others will see it and create a lie to explain it away, yet none will escape its witness." The initial flash then turned into intricate patterns, lines of pure, golden fire crisscrossing the atmosphere, forming a celestial script in a language too ancient for humanity to read. My soul knew, with absolute certainty, this was heaven's handwriting. Below, the earth trembled, not with the violence of destruction, but with a gentle, resonant hum of awakening. I saw visions of churches packed with people who hadn't prayed in years. I saw bitter rivals in war-torn countries lowering their weapons to gaze at the sky. I saw strangers on city streets embracing, their divisions momentarily erased by a shared, holy awe. Then, as quickly as it came, the vision faded. I was back in the presence of Jesus, my heart racing with the magnitude of what I had seen. "This," he said, his voice both a comfort and a warning, "is only the beginning." The golden light of the celestial sign faded, and the presence of Jesus beside me seemed to dim as if to draw my focus elsewhere. Suddenly, I was no longer in the void of space, but hovering just above the waters of the earth. I saw the deep blue of the Pacific, the stormy gray of the Atlantic. The oceans looked alive, restless. I watched massive currents move in strange, intricate rhythms that did not follow any known meteorological or tidal charts. There was no hurricane, no visible storm, yet the seas were breathing with a deep, expectant energy, as if waiting for a signal. "Why am I seeing this, Lord?" I asked, my voice echoing in a place where no echo should exist. Jesus answered, his tone both firm and profoundly tender. "The waters will tell the truth long before humanity is willing to admit it. Watch." My perspective shifted, soaring over coastlines. I saw the iconic skylines of New York and Tokyo, the sprawling beaches of Miami, and the small, vulnerable islands scattered across the Pacific. On every shore, people stood at the edge, gazing at the horizon as if drawn by an unheard call. At first, there was nothing. Then a silence fell over the world, a quiet so thick and heavy it felt alive, and the tide began to pull back. It was not the violent, chaotic retreat of a tsunami, but a slow, unnatural, and perfectly synchronized ebbing across the entire planet. My mind, the scientist, frantically searched for a cause, a lunar anomaly, a sudden polar shift, but no model could account for this. It was as if the oceans were obeying a command, not a law of physics. Fishermen on their boats dropped their nets in disbelief. Children pointed at the vast, exposed seabed, a world of reefs and sandbars never before seen by human eyes. The world held its breath. And then from the depths, an eruption of soft, blue-green light. It wasn't an explosion of destruction, but a silent, beautiful illumination, as if the sea itself were turning on a light to reveal secrets buried for millennia. I saw the shapes of what looked like ancient, submerged ruins, their impossible geometry glowing, but there was more. I saw vast shoals of bioluminescent creatures, millions of them, moving in perfect unison, forming colossal, intricate patterns on the ocean's surface, mandalas of living light, sacred geometry drawn by the hand of nature itself. "What does it mean?" I whispered, trembling. Jesus' reply was calm and clear. "The earth remembers, the oceans will uncover what humanity has forgotten. This is not a disaster, Eris, it is a revelation." I realized then it wasn't a warning meant to inspire fear. It was an unveiling of a truth long hidden, a message from the planet itself. On the shores, the people watching didn't scream in terror. Some wept with joy, some sang, some simply fell to their knees in reverent silence. For many, it was the proof they had spent their entire lives begging to see. The vision faded, but the feeling of the ocean's deep, steady heartbeat stayed with me. The feeling of the ocean's heartbeat faded, and the vision shifted instantly. I was no longer above the water, but looking down at a vast, glowing map of the United States. It was laid out before me like a schematic on a cosmic view screen, every state and city lit from within, but the light was unstable. It flickered and dimmed, then surged with a frantic brightness, like a heart monitor displaying an arrhythmia. The entire nation pulsed with a light that was under immense strain. Lord, I asked softly, why America? Because its choices ripple further than it knows, Jesus replied, his voice resonating with a solemn, undeniable truth. My view zoomed in. I saw streets filled with people, crowds divided, their faces illuminated by the screens of their phones. Some carried digital banners of hope, their messages calling for unity. Others shouted in anger, their words amplified by a storm of social media. It wasn't a physical war, and it wasn't a simple protest. It was a profound test of hearts, happening simultaneously in every home and on every corner. Something unseen was pressing on the nation, squeezing it like clay to see what shape it would take. Then I saw the nature of the test. Power grids flickered, causing city lights to dim in unison. Financial market tickers froze on impossible numbers. Communication networks would suddenly drop, silencing the endless noise for a few eerie, unnerving moments. It was as if a divine hand were on the nation's power switch, gently flicking it, not to destroy, but to remind them how fragile their systems were. I noticed the sky above the map was layered with clouds that were not natural. They were dark and heavy, pulsing like shadows pressing down. But every time the shadow grew stronger, brilliant beams of pure, white light would break through from below. I saw a beam erupt from a small church in a rural town. Another from a family kneeling in prayer in a suburban home. Another from a single, lonely person weeping by their hospital bed. Lord, what is this? I whispered, a cold fear creeping into my scientific mind which could not process this war of light and shadow. His answer was calm, but carried the weight of a coming storm. A shaking not to destroy, but to reveal. America will be pressed to choose humility or pride, compassion or division. The unseen test is not of its land, but of its soul. I saw leaders struggling to speak truth, their voices drowned out by the digital static. I saw families torn apart by arguments born of fear. But I also saw incredible moments of grace, strangers reaching across ideological divides to offer a helping hand when the systems failed, neighbors sharing resources when the power went out. The test was everywhere, from the highest halls of power to the smallest towns, and then I understood. It wasn't about politics, it wasn't about economics, it was about love. When all the noise was stripped away, would America remember how to love? The vision left me trembling because I knew the answer would shape not just the nation, but the entire world. The trembling vision of America faded, and the next image formed quickly, with a stark, allegorical clarity. I saw the leaders of the world, not standing behind podiums or seated at conference tables, but gathered at a great, dusty crossroad under a twilight sky. I could see them clearly, familiar faces from America, Europe, Asia, and beyond. From my cosmic perspective, stripped of their earthly authority, they looked like small, fragile variables in a vast and complex equation. What struck me was their posture. Some looked weary, their heads bowed as if under an immense weight. Others stared ahead with a hollow, steely determination. The crossroads before them stretched into two distinct paths. One path glowed with a soft, golden light. It was narrow, and I could see that it climbed steeply into the hills. The other was a wide, smooth, paved road that descended gently into a valley lined with deep, comfortable-looking shadows. Lord, they can't see the light, I said, a sense of dread rising in me as I watched most of the leaders glancing only toward the wide, easy road. They do see, Aris, Jesus replied, his voice steady and clear. In their hearts they all see, but they must choose. and their choice will not only guide their nations, it will test their very souls. I watched in silence as, one by one, leaders began to step onto the wide path, convinced it was the easier, more sensible route. Instantly, I saw visions of their nations erupting in applause, cheering bold promises of wealth, security, and technological progress. I saw gleaming new cities and powerful economies. But then I saw the people. In their beautiful high-rise apartments, surrounded by every comfort, their faces were gray and disconnected, their inner light, which I could now perceive, a dim and lonely flicker. The shadows of the wide road had swallowed their joy. My gaze shifted to the narrow, golden path. Only a few leaders stepped forward onto it, their first steps slow and hesitant. I saw them being mocked by the others, their own nations questioning their difficult choice. But as they began to climb, I saw their people grow stronger. Their nations looked simpler, less materialistic, but the people were filled with a vibrant light. I saw them laughing, sharing food, working together in communities, their faces filled with a resilience and joy the others lacked. I whispered, my heart aching with the truth of it, so few chose the light. Jesus looked at me, and though his expression was one of peace, I could feel his sadness. The easy road tempts many, but the light will always remain for those who seek it. This vision shook me to my core. For the first time, I saw that the fate of billions truly rested on the intimate, spiritual decisions of a few, and that those decisions were not just political, but eternal. The crossroads faded, leaving me with a question burning in my soul: what road will they take? The final vision began, unlike the others, in complete and total darkness. The crossroads faded, and I was left in a void, a perfect emptiness. I waited, a profound unease settling in my soul, wondering if the connection had been lost, if the final answer was simply nothingness. But then, a single, golden spark ignited in the center of the darkness. It began to spread slowly, tenderly, not like a consuming fire, but like liquid dawn pouring into the void, until it filled everything with a warm, living, golden light. I gasped. My scientific mind had no name for this. It wasn't the light of a star, it wasn't the energy of a quasar. It was a light that felt alive, a light that felt like love itself. "What is this?" I asked softly, my voice barely a whisper. Jesus' reply made tears well in my eyes. "This is the end of the storm." The light coalesced into a vision. I saw people standing outside their homes after what seemed like days of turmoil. The skies above them were clear, but not just clear. They glowed with soft, golden hues that seemed to pour directly into the hearts of everyone below. I saw children laughing in green fields, their faces upturned to the golden sky. I saw elders who had looked so weary in the previous visions, now lifting their hands in praise, tears of joy streaming down their faces. I saw strangers hugging on city streets without hesitation, every old wound of division and suspicion seeming to heal and dissolve in the gentle light. It was not utopia, it was renewal. This golden light seeped into the very fabric of the planet. I watched a polluted, grimy river transform in an instant, its waters running crystal clear. I saw a patch of cracked, barren desert ground suddenly sprout with lush, green grass. The earth itself seemed to sigh in relief as the light healed its deepest wounds. "Is this heaven?" I whispered, completely overwhelmed. Jesus' answer was gentle and full of promise. "It is a taste, a promise. It is what will come after faith endures the storm. It is the world your hearts have always prayed for." I couldn't stop crying then, not from sadness, but from a hope so pure and powerful it felt like a physical presence, real, touchable, and eternal. As the vision faded, I knew this was the most important part of the entire message. No matter the celestial signs, no matter the tests or the difficult choices, there would be a golden light waiting on the other side. The renewal was real, the promise was true. When the last beautiful vision faded, I was left standing and trembling before Jesus. The sheer scale of what I had been shown was settling upon me, a weight of holy responsibility. My thoughts were racing. "Why me?" I whispered, the words feeling small and fragile in the vast, sacred space. "Why not someone wiser, stronger? I'm just a man of equations and cold, hard data. I stumble through my own life. How can I carry a message for the world?" His light grew warmer, softer, almost like a father smiling at a child's earnest confusion. "Because you have mapped the heavens, Eris," he replied. his voice a gentle reassurance in my soul. And now you will help them see the heart that beats within them. I shook my head, a wave of personal failure washing over me. But I'm not the right person. I've been blind to so much, I confessed, the words catching in my throat. My own son, tried to show me the soul of the universe with a paintbrush, and I corrected him with a textbook. I missed the most important truth, right in my own home. His reply pierced the heart of my guilt with a beam of pure grace. Perfection is not what I ask, willingness is. The warmth of his presence intensified, and I felt a profound sense of forgiveness. You looked for truth in the distant stars while your son painted it on a canvas. Both are forms of seeking. Your willingness to finally see, to bridge those two worlds, is what matters now. Tears rolled down my face, not of sadness, but of a relief so absolute it felt like a lifetime of intellectual pride was dissolving into humility. All those years I had thought my career defined me, that my peer-reviewed papers were my legacy. I thought my mistakes as a father and my lack of faith disqualified me from anything like this. Yet here I was, chosen not for my intellect, but for my newfound willingness to listen to a truth beyond my instruments. You have been faithful in the small search for knowledge, he continued. Now you will carry a greater truth. Share what you have seen. Do not fear the doubts of others, for you have already conquered your own. My heart ached with both awe and a lingering fear, but the warmth of his love silenced every excuse. Deep down, I understood. Sometimes God doesn't pick the most eloquent voice or the most righteous soul. He picks the one who, after a lifetime of saying no, will finally, humbly whisper yes. And somehow in that moment of complete surrender, I whispered back, "Yes, Lord." The moment my spirit whispered, "Yes, Lord," everything shifted again. The serene, golden light dimmed, and the profound silence was replaced by a rushing sound, like a great solar wind moving through an open canyon in space. My form felt weightless, and yet I could sense a powerful, deliberate movement, as if I was being carried back through the same tunnel of creation I had first entered. The cosmic display around me swirled faster now, the epic film of the universe playing in reverse. Galaxies folded back into primordial dust, stars collapsed back into silent nebulae. It was as if creation itself was escorting me back to the shores of my own time. I heard the voice one last time, not as a whisper, but as a clear, resonant command etched into my soul. "Remember, speak, time is short." "I will," I whispered back to the swirling cosmos, though my own voice shook with the weight of the promise. "Just don't let me forget." The tunnel narrowed, the infinite corridor of stars and galaxies constricting around me. I felt a pressure in my chest, the familiar sensation of G-forces from astronaut training, the feeling of a rapid descent. My earthly thoughts rushed back in a torrent, my son Leo's face, the unfinished equations on my whiteboard at the observatory, the disbelieving faces of my colleagues who would demand data for a story that had none. For a fleeting, selfish moment, I didn't want to leave. That perfect peace, that absolute knowing, that loving presence, I could have stayed in that reality forever. "Lord, please," I begged in a final, desperate thought, "don't take this away from me." The answer came not as a voice, but as a final wave of warmth, a whisper of wind against my soul. "I am with you always, even when you return." And then the silence broke. My lungs burned as if trying to draw a breath for the first time. My body, which had been an abstract concept of light, suddenly felt crushingly heavy. The tunnel of skis collapsed into a single, brilliant beam of light that seemed to pull my consciousness down, down, down through an infinite darkness until, with a jolt, I opened my eyes again. The first thing I felt was air, not the ethereal substance of the beyond, but sharp, heavy, real air, burning as it filled my lungs. My chest rose and fell with a ragged, desperate rhythm, as if I'd been drowning for hours. My eyes blinked open, and the world looked both achingly familiar and jarringly foreign. I was in a hospital, the sterile white ceiling, the relentless, rhythmic beeping of machines, a nurse leaning over me, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock and relief. "He's back," she whispered to someone out of my line of sight. "Doctor, we have a pulse." I turned my head weakly, the simple movement an immense effort, and there he was. My son Leo was sitting in a chair beside the bed, clutching not my hand, but a large, framed canvas. Tears were streaming down his young face. It was his painting, the swirling vortex of emerald and violet, and in the center, the dark, silent, celestial eye. Our gazes met. I wanted to tell him everything in that instant, the tunnel of creation, the voice of the cosmos, the impossible visions, but my throat was dry, my lips barely able to move. So I just looked from the painting to his tear-streaked face and whispered, my voice a dry rasp, "You saw it too, didn't you?" The nurse thought I was delirious, but Leo leaned closer, his eyes widening with a sudden, trembling hope that went beyond a son's love for his father. He believed me. In that moment, he knew his dream hadn't been just a dream, and my journey hadn't been just a medical event. Every breath I took felt new, as if I were inhaling not just oxygen, but purpose. The machines beeped their steady rhythm, but to me, it sounded like a choir, a constant reminder, you are alive for a reason. I lay there, physically weak but burning with a mission inside. My life was no longer my own. It was a vessel for the message I now carried. The days after my recovery were the hardest, not because of the weakness in my body, but because of the immense, celestial weight in my soul. How do you share something like this? How do you explain a silent gamma-ray burst or visions of the future to a world that trusts only in peer-reviewed data? The first time I tried, my colleagues at the observatory listened with a practiced clinical patience. "Eris, it was a textbook case of cerebral hypoxia," one said kindly. "The light is a common artifact of the optic nerve shutting down under extreme stress." Another added, "Your brain was simply trying to make sense of the anomalous data you saw. It created a narrative." I wanted to show them the data of my soul, the equations of love and renewal I had seen, but I just smiled quietly. I knew what I had seen, and no amount of logical dismissal could erase the truth etched into my very being. At night, I wrote everything down on pages and pages of legal pads, my trembling hands trying to capture what no human words could truly hold. Leah would sit beside me watching. "Dad," he whispered one night, looking at my frantic scribbling, "this isn't just for us, is it? It's for everyone." He was right, my purpose wasn't about predicting tomorrow's cosmic events anymore. It was about preparing hearts for what tomorrow holds, and my first act was to finally, truly see the universe my son had been showing me all along.